Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back in. Football Friday right here on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. We're going to put the football on the back burner for a few minutes because the New York Yankees tonight start their run in the ALCS. The Yankees in the ALCS. Who would have thought going into this year that the Yankees would be in the postseason, let alone 4 wins away from going to the World Series? Just an unbelievable run for the Yankees this year. And in the words of John Sterling, I guess he's right when he says you can't predict baseball, Susan, because this has been some run for the New York Yankees. And the perfect guest to talk about Tanaka and Keuchel, Astros and Yankees, is a man that played many years with the Houston Astros and then did spend about 40 games with some postseason games with the New York Yankees. And that's Lance Berkman, who's kind enough to hop on board with us right now. Game 1 tonight, 8 p.m. in Houston. Lance, appreciate a few minutes. Zach Gelb here, and how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. So, like I was saying, you spent 37 regular season games with the Yankees. You were in 2 playoff series. You guys lost in 6 to the Texas Rangers. Look back at that quick time for me with the time that you spent with the Yankees.
Well, I mean, it was a tough time in my career just because I'd been traded. I'd had knee surgery in spring training, and it was the worst year of my career statistically. And, you know, I regret not playing as good as I felt like I was capable ever wanted to when I was there during the regular season. But the postseason felt like I found a little bit of a groove and had a good time. And then we had a decent little run there, although I think everybody was disappointed based on the personnel that we had that we came up short of the World Series that year. And, you know, the reason I accepted a trade to the Yankees was you know, to get a chance to play with my good friend Andy Pettit again, but also to play in a World Series. And we didn't get it done, but certainly New York is a great atmosphere for postseason baseball. And, you know, really and truly Houston is too with Minute Maid Park being enclosed the way it is. It's really loud. There's a lot of intensity. So this series is going to be a lot of fun. I know the players are going to enjoy the way the fans are going to get into it in both places.
I know you talked about the tough times that you were going through that led you to New York, and then eventually you came around and had some productive play in the postseason. You look at that Yankees roster, though. Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez, Curtis Granderson, Posada was still there, Mo, CeCe, and like you mentioned, Andy Pettit. After spending so much time in one place, what was it like to walk into a locker room, you know, you being a great player and joining so many other great players?
Well, it's weird. I kind of felt like I was a rookie all over again in terms of, you know, when you're in a place for a certain period of time and you've been able to have some success there, you know, you build a certain amount of credibility with that organization so that if you don't get a hit in a big situation, the attitude as well, you know, he's gotten plenty of other big hits, so you sort of have this, you know, this bank to work with of coming through and performing when the team needs you to perform to fall back on, and it's really comforting from a mental standpoint. And then when you go into a new environment, you kind of feel like you're earning your way all over again. You don't have the same equity built up with your teammates, and so you're kind of starting from scratch. And it was a really, you know, it's how you feel like when you're a rookie, when you first come in, and you know, you're trying to establish yourself in the major leagues, and you're trying to, you know, demonstrate to the others that you belong there. And so it was very similar feeling for me, you know, having spent most of my career in one place and then coming to a new team with a bunch of new teammates, and, you know, particularly the caliber of the teammates that I had. You certainly want to do your best to impress them, and it didn't work out, like I said, the way I wanted it to. But it was some of that probably had to do with, you know, just trying to get comfortable in a new environment, and so it was a tough deal for me.
You know, some of these guys in this series, you know, being the Houston player that you were, and then also having some guys that you played on the Yankees with in that short time in New York are still playing baseball in this series. You still talk to some of those guys that you played with that are still playing today?
Yeah, I don't really talk to anybody on the Yankees, although, you know, Brett Gardner and CeCe, you know, two of the guys that were there when I was there, they're great guys, and I'm sure I'm going to be down at the ballpark tonight, and if I see him, I'll say hello to him. And, of course, Joe was there as the manager. And that's the one thing I really appreciated about my time in New York is just top to bottom, every single person in the Yankee organization is first class. And it's not, you know, there's a reason why they've been as successful as they have. probably more than one reason, but I tell you, they really, really do it right when it comes to treating their players, when it comes to the personnel. I mean, I'm talking about clubhouse guys, trainers, everybody that works with the team, traveling secretary, first class, first-rate guys. And so, as many of the guys that are still around from when I was there, I'll be looking forward to seeing them tonight.
But you look at someone like a Carlos Beltran who returned to Houston, left after having a really sensational postseason with the amount of prodigious home runs that he was hitting. Then he went to New York with the Mets, and now he's back at Houston. So it seems very fitting for Beltran probably at the end of his career. Who knows how much longer he's going to play, but to be in Houston. And his veteran presence, Lance, I'd have to imagine is playing a big role in this Houston run.
Well, I think absolutely. I think whenever you have a team that is as inexperienced from a postseason standpoint as most of the Astro players are, I know they did have a couple of years ago they locked up with the Royals, and so they have some of that experience to draw from. But Carlos is a guy that's been in the playoffs several times. He's had a tremendous amount of success playing in the playoffs. He's been in a couple of World Series, and so. That's where that veteran experience, that's why you sign a guy like that so that he can kind of rub off on the other guys that are there. And so I think with the way Carlos' personality is, he's done an excellent job of that. I know AJ's really appreciated having him on the team, and I think his contributions go way beyond what you see on the stat line with him talking to guys, being in the dugout, and just providing that calming presence that's so important this time of the year.
Lance Berkman with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Houston and the Yankees tonight, 8 p.m. in Houston for Game 1 of the ALCS. I know you touched upon it a little bit, but last year they didn't make the postseason, the Astros, coming off a very impressive 2015 where they defeated the Yankees in the wild card game and then eventually lost in the ALDS. Now this year, the Astros 101 wins. They're going to be the favorite in this series, being the home team. What do you think this team, Lance, learned from last year's struggles after getting a little bit taste of that postseason success? What did they learn from last season to have the season that they're having this time around?
Well, I think you learn you gain another year of experience and seasoning, but I think beyond anything else, you learn that these postseason experiences are to be valued, and they don't. It's not easy, and to have an opportunity to make a run in the postseason is something that you can't take for granted. And there's a lot of players that play a long time that have either zero or minimal postseason experience. And so as a player, it's hard to appreciate when you're in it. But I think whenever you've been to the postseason and you've had an early exit, and then you get an opportunity to advance and get an opportunity to play for a chance at a world championship, that you value those. And I think that above anything else has lent the Astros a little bit of a sense of urgency. They realize that the window to capitalize on the personnel that they have is short. It's hard to keep a team together with free agency, with the big dollars in the game the way it is now. So I think they have a very good sense of the fact that we need to try to take advantage of this while we've got these guys here and while we're able to play at this high level.
Let's talk a little bit about Altuve. You get to see him a lot more than we do. In my opinion, he's the AL MVP this year, and that's taken nothing away from Aaron Judge. But Altuve, just from start to finish, never really had a bad month. Batting .346 in July. For the month of July, had an incredible .485 batting average. Since you get to see him almost every day, what impresses you the most about this player? Because he's really darn good.
Well, you just said it. It's the consistency that he performs, and that's a very tough thing. It's a very unusual thing, and it's an extremely valuable thing for a baseball team. When you know that you've got a guy that's hitting in the middle of the lineup that is just I don't want to say he's slump-proof because everybody has rough stretches, but I mean, my goodness, it seems like he's always getting 2 or 3 hits. He's always on base. He's always making something happen. You don't have to worry about him disappearing for an extended period of time. He's just a real steady performer, and I think that to me is what stands out about Jose, is just the fact that you can just count on him. He's going to give you a good tough at bat, and he's rarely off. You're rarely having to worry about, man, what can we do to get this guy going? So that I think, and the fact that he can steal bases is what like when you combine his defense, his base running, and what he gives you from an offensive production standpoint, he's as good as any in the game.
And number 2 in the AL MVP race to me has to be Aaron Judge. Now, he did struggle in July and August, but had a really strong September. So far in this postseason has had a plethora of strikeouts, 16 to be exact. Did make that big catch in Game 3 where he robbed the home run. What do you expect out of Judge in this series as he looks to bounce back?
Well, that's, I look for him to bounce back. I think he is a very talented young hitter. He's extremely exciting to watch. He's dangerous at any time. He can hit the ball at the ballpark. And it's kind of like a rumbling volcano. You just don't know when it's going to explode. So I look for him to definitely have some big at-bats this series. It's something the Astros are going to have to be very conscious of because, with good hitters, at some point they're going to find it, the rhythm, the timing, whatever it is that's throwing him off a little bit. And when he does, he's capable of doing some serious damage.
Lance Berkman with us right now as we get you ready for Game 1 tonight in the ALCS. Yankees and Astros. This is such a out-of-nowhere type of run for the New York Yankees when you look at it, where many people thought going into this season they'd be about 500, give or take a few games. Yankees are in uncharted territory, really playing with house money. Usually they're not in this underdog role. A lot of pressures on Houston in this series. Does that make a difference to a player? Because I know fans and analysts, we get caught up in pressure, and also then looking at the underdog. Does that make a difference to the player or no?
No, the players really don't concern themselves too much with that. I think there is sort of a sense of, when you're not expected to be where you are, of kind of having an us against the world mentality or, hey, we got nothing to lose type mentality. And I do think there's something to, like you've seen with the Nationals, where they haven't won a playoff series, and just getting over that hump, there is a mental barrier there. But in terms of, like, going into this series with the Yankees and the Astros feeling pressure to get to the World Series, the Astros are a very determined group. And, they're one of the reasons I think they're good is because they know they're good, and they're very confident. They play with a little bit of a swagger, which is unusual for a group that really, to this point, this particular group of Astros, this is as far as they've ever been. Like you said, use the word uncharted territory. It is for this group of guys. But they act like they've been there before. They act like they expect to be there. And from the times I've been around them, they act like they expect to win the World Series. And that's something that's really hard to, you can't quantify it. You just kind of get a sense of it when you're around them. And it's going to be it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the series, because the Astros know they belong in this series, and they are going to embrace, I think, the role of being the favorites. And it's almost like the late 90s Yankees, where they just have that confidence that it doesn't matter, we're going to roll right through this. And so we'll see if they can make that happen.
We all know how good this Yankees bullpen is, and that's been evident by what we even did see in the first postseason game, in the wild card game, that bullpen having to go 8 2/3 innings when Luis Severino did have a very short outing. The big key, though, for the Yanks is, can they have the starters that can get the lead over to the bullpen? Tanaka, Keuchel in game number 1, Severino, Verlander in game number 2, CeCe in game 3, and then Sonny Gray in game 4. What do you make out of this Yankees rotation going up against the Astros starting pitchers?
Well, I think actually, this is where the Yankees kind of surprised you a little bit. I think the Astros and Yankees are in very similar positions with their starting rotation. I think whichever team gets the most significant innings out of their starters is going to win the series. I think, as much as being made of the bullpen type games, in a 7-game series, it's really hard to ask your bullpen to pitch extended innings. You start to see guys that are not nearly as effective as they ordinarily are when they're pitching like they're used to during the regular season. And those bullpen guys, when they get tired, are susceptible to having some bad innings and some things go wrong. And they're not nearly the same. They don't have the same effectiveness over the course of a long series if they're being exposed over and over and over again. And so the starting pitching in the series is going to be very important. And I know that they're not matching up against each other, but the way that I'm handicapped it is I look at Keuchel and I look at CeCe as being very similar. and that they're both left-handed. They both rely on location, movement, and pitchability, for lack of a better word, rather than pure stuff to get guys out. I think that Verlander it compares favorably with who's the big right-hander? Throws hard, the young kid.
Severino.
Yeah, Severino. I think that they compare favorably in that they're stuff guys, and they rely on striking guys out, and you might give a slight edge there to Verlander because of the experience, but in terms of stuff, I think they profile very closely to one another. And then I think both the Astros and the Yankees are in a similar position with their 3 and 4 starters. They have guys that are very capable major league pitchers that have had spots where they've pitched extremely well and even dominant at times. But I don't think that either team, has 100% trust in the other guys in their rotation going forward. And I think that's where you could see the bullpen come into play. And so it's going to be interesting to see how those guys that are pitching in that 3rd and 4th position, and I don't mean like games 3 and 4 because I know that it doesn't line up quite perfectly like that, but I'm just saying in terms of who they consider their 3 and 4 starters, how those guys pitch is going to have an impact, I think a big impact on how this series goes.
Wrapping up with Lance Berkman, since we're here in New Jersey, we get a mix of New York and Philadelphia fans. Get into 2 teams that aren't in the postseason, the Mets and the Phillies. Both of them have been rumored to have some interest in a former teammate of yours to be their next manager in Brad Ausmus. If Brad was to be the manager, of the next 2 teams, and he has someone that has managerial experience with this run that he just came off of, what does a team getting in Brad if he is the next manager of the Mets or the Phillies?
Well, Brad is, first of all, he's a brilliant guy. He's extremely smart. He graduated Dartmouth in 3 years while he was playing minor league baseball. And he's a guy that, as a catcher, really has a great feel for the game. He's a very even-keeled personality, which is what you kind of need in a manager. You can't get too high or too low. And I think he's a good communicator. So I think that if either of those organizations, if they decided to bring Brad in as their manager, they'd be getting a very qualified guy and a guy I think would do a great job for him.
Yeah, since it's this time of the year of the postseason, must bring back some good memories for you. You did eventually win a World Series with the Cardinals, went on a nice run with the Houston Astros a few times. In your career, 52 postseason games, a .317 average, so you delivered on the big stage. What are some memories that come back from your playing days this time of the year?
Oh, man, well, it's hard to not remember the whole World Series, really, against the Rangers. In that crazy Game 6 where they had a 2-run lead twice, and we were 1 strike away from being eliminated twice, and we ended up coming back and at both times, unfortunately, Game 7, and of course winning the World Series, and then the 2 LCSs that we played when I was in Houston against the Cardinals. Both of those were I tell you what, the 2004 NLCS, it got overshadowed by a great ALCS. That was the year that the Red Sox came back from 3-0 down to beat the Yankees. I'm sure you guys remember that, maybe painfully. But that LCS overshadowed what I consider to be an extremely good LCS also, and that was ours.
Versus the Cardinals, right?
Yeah, the Cardinals. And
was a great one.
So there was walk-off homers and on both sides and great, just a lot of intense baseball. So those are some of my postseason highlights.
And before we let you run, just because, watching those Astros team, and you were right, and that 2004 League Championship Series doesn't get enough credit, and it's a little bit bizarre now seeing the Astros in the American League after all these years. But you look back at those Astros teams that you were on with some of the players, Bagwell, Biggio, Beltran, Oswalt. You had Roger Clemens there as well. What stands out about those teams that you were on in Houston, with some of those great players after all these years?
Well, to me, the thing that stands out is the pitching. I mean, that was what we made it to the only World Series that the Astros have ever played in, based on the fact that we had really a couple of former Yankees with Pettit and Clemens in our rotation, and we also had Roy Oswalt, who's a great pitcher, and then our bullpen was unbelievable. In 2004, you felt like really 4 and 5, you felt like if you had a lead going into the 6th inning that you could kind of throw your hat out on the field and you would still win the game. Those guys were that dominant. And so That's what stands out to me about my time in Houston and those playoff runs is just the pitching. I mean, we just rode that pitching to the success that we have, and it's really. I mean, I just don't think that the formula for success has changed. Pitching and defense, pitching and defense. So, I mean, look for that in this series. Whoever pitches and plays the best defense, I know both teams have very capable offenses, but that's what's going to be the determining factor. I've just seen it too many times.
And finally, because I do agree with you, condensing the game is the big key, and we've seen that over the years. I know what your heart is probably telling you, but what's your head telling you about this series? Who do you got in this one?
I like the Astros, and not because I'm a Houston homer. To me, it comes down to home field advantage. I mean, I know how well the Astros play when they're at home, and of course, playing up in New York is an extremely difficult thing to do. But if you look at the history of the recent Astros, they've actually played very well against the Yankees. So whatever it is, they don't get intimidated coming up there, and I know that our home field here is a real advantage for the Astros. So I see the teams to be fairly evenly matched, but I think the home field advantage gives a slight nod to the Astros.
Hey, one more thing that just popped into my mind as we end up this conversation with Lance Berkman. Joe Girardi, I know you touched upon this a little bit in the beginning of the conversation and how classy the Yankees organization did treat you, but Girardi had a big blunder in Game 2, and a guy like Todd Frazier, who was traded over here, midway through the year, right at the deadline, really was supportive of Joe Girardi, just as someone that, only got to know him for a little bit amount of time when he was the manager with the Yankees. What did you really like about playing for Joe Girardi?
Well, just Joe's awesome. I mean, you talk about a guy that's accessible, that doesn't get too high or too low, and as you guys know, the scrutiny that the Yankee players and manager are under is probably more so than just about anywhere else in the country.
It's crazy, Lance, because this is a year no one thought the Yankees would make the postseason, and people were calling for his head last week. It's ridiculous. You're right.
Yeah, no, absolutely ridiculous. And this is going to sound you're probably going to laugh at this, but I'm a high school baseball coach, and I can tell you that I'll make a mistake in a high school game sometimes where there's so much going on. There's a lot as a manager, as a coach that you're thinking about, and you're trying to, you're worried about the matchups and who's coming up next, and there's 100 different things that it's easy to let something, even as it's easy to sit in your living room and scream at the television and, what in the world, why isn't he doing this or that? But I can tell you that when you get into those into the competition, that's why those bench coaches are so important. That's why your coaching staff, you got to have those guys, because one man really, you can't manage everything. I mean, you really have to have people helping you. And so anyway, I mean, and mistakes are still made because it's a game played by human beings. So I love Joe. I think he's great. I think the Yankees are making a huge mistake if they got rid of him. Of course, I don't know what he's planning on doing, but he's a very good manager.
Lance, hey, this was great stuff. Such a thrill after watching you after all these years to get a chance to talk to you. We appreciate it, and best of luck moving forward, all right?
All right, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. There's Lance Berkman joining us on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Let's take a quick break. We're coming on back. We'll get back to the football